Okay, so today we have our chickadee and beautiful bird photography. All right, so I've got my 8x8 canvas today, and I applied one layer of this basic acrylic Liquitex gesso, just so the paint just kind of glides on a little nicer. And I'm going to start out by using some transparent brown oxide and ultramarine blue, and I just kind of want to start off with kind of a gray the canvas down for a base. So what I mixed in was just some of the turf, the Gamsol odorless mineral turf, so it's not water, it's just turf. And I don't use any liquid, or I don't use any mediums like that. They kind of get my paint. This makes my paint, if I have too much of this on, it gets too slippery as it is. So turf is handy just to get the paint spreading around. It's the equivalent of using water when you paint with acrylic. Just kind of get paint over, and I'm wiping away any excess. And I kind of like that color, it's a nice tone. Okay. So first thing I want to do is make sure I sketch in where my bird is going to go, and I want to sketch in a little branch. Always want to kind of do a little rough draft, because I want to know, that I got room for everything. Okay. So when I'm painting birds, I like to pay attention to the negative space between the bottom of the bird and the branch. Because I like the way he's standing, I really want to, make sure I have that space, because it's kind of the character in this painting. He's quite cute the way he's standing there. So I'm gonna look at my reference photo, and I'm gonna make sure there's that little bit of space there. I might add a little transparent red oxide into the mix. I want to make sure I got this kind of leaning in angle. How he's kind of leaning forward. So, some people want to use just to guide your eye, you can use your paintbrush. This is just a scruffy old brush. It's just a 0 flat that I'm using, in case you're wondering. And I'm just kind of, gonna sketch it in a little. I like to just kind of rough it in. So again, I'll look at, the angle of his back there when I'm getting that in, just to and the angle of the tail as well. And you can take a little more time to perfect your drawing than me, because I have a little bit of a time frame. I have to work when I can't get overly picky, but you can get a little more picky with your drawing than me. Just added a little transparent, little bit of that ultramarine blue to that mix of transparent red oxide, and just kind of darken some of the feathers in. And I'm just going to kind of mark off where his little legs are. Another thing you can kind of gauge your drawing with is if you look at where his eye is, you know, it's all the way over here. If you're going straight down, you can kind of look at how his eye lines up with that 1 foot. Just use something that's kind of, you know, a focal point to gauge, you know, how his body, like I used to end up with birds with these bellies that went way out like that because I wasn't paying attention to the, you know, where everything lined up. And so it just helps to pay attention to some lines when you're drawing your birdie. And make this a little thicker. And I might add some cobalt blue, just to add, you know, a little bit of different color to that twig. Okay. And on one of the things I like to do with branches is I'll kind of take my brush sometimes and just see if you do that. I'll zoom in for you. You create kind of the look of a branch without having to really do all those little, you know, lines and painting. So I kind of, if I remember, I'll pull the paint down, and you really kind of get almost a roundness to the branch already. You know, you can play around with that. So now we got all these little blossoms here. I'm going to block in with some of the Quin Red because I like that pink color. So I'll just use my same little scruffy brush because these are, and I'm not going to worry too much, you know, about how detailed they are. I'm just going to kind of block in the basic, you know, shapes. Definitely I use an older brush, like, you know, a more scruffy brush to scrub in these shapes. So I don't, you know, wouldn't do this to a brand new brush. This is just the Quin Red that I'm using. And just blocking in what I see. I love the bit of color it adds to this painting. of exaggerating a little, but why not have some fun with this? Okay, so I'm just gonna block in those, and then with pink, sometimes I'll take my paper towel and make a little point like this, and I'll just wipe away some of the light. It just kind of has more of a glow to it. So later you can do your highlights if you want, but sometimes you might just want to leave some of that natural kind of glowy look with just the wipe off technique. And I use this technique in other when I'm painting flowers. It's a really great way to get just some real pink that you can't get otherwise. Like if I tried to mix up a pink that bright, I just really, probably wouldn't get the same effect. You can see where this one had less terp in it and this one had more. If you have more terp, it wipes out more, it wipes away the pigment more. So if I want that to be a little more wiped away, I can just dip my paper towel right into my terp jar, and I'm going to see how I can lift off quite a bit of the pink. And that's just putting some terp at the end of my paper towel. So you kind of get a nice look there. And then so now what I can do is I'm going to get a little bit of that transparent brown oxide and some of the cobalt blue. I'm just going to kind of make a grayish, warm gray color just to start blocking in some of and then I see on his underbelly something a little warmer. Just trying to figure out what color would be the best. Well, okay, so I think that mix there, I'm going to just show you separately because that's a lot of different mixing I did. So if I want a nice warm underbelly color for our chickadee, my brush, sorry, has too much paint on it. Okay, I'll get some white and a little brown oxide, and I can use something like that for the chickadee, but for right down low, I want it to be a little darker, so I'll add a little transparent brown oxide, a little bit of cobalt blue, and if that looks a little too blue, I add a little bit of orange to it, and that kind of really warms it up. And then you can add a little bit more orange to your bird. And like I said before, when you mix in a color, you want to mix it in from the side. You don't want to go, oh, I want to make a nice, color and put it right in the middle, because you end up with sometimes too much of the color. So you kind of want to just blend it in from the side. So you keep your puddle of paint, you know, clean. So if you don't like what you're mixing, you can, you know, calm it down a bit and stop mixing. If you don't like the color you're mixing, just stop using it right away. It's tempting to wanna keep going, but you gotta know when to walk away from a bad color and know when to run. So what I'm going to do, because I'm going to do sort of that blue background anyways, just so you can see the contrast better, I'm going to just get in some of the background color a little early around the bird so you guys can see. I'll mix a little cobalt blue, and I'll go over the background color again later when I do the whole thing, but I'm gonna get in some of that color so it's less confusing when you're watching the video. It's too much of the same. The bird base is so similar to the background that it's hard for you to see. So I'm just going to put in a little bit of that background there. That's probably easier now for you to see. Probably isn't a bad idea because then I can gauge the values better. There. I'm sure that helps a little. He was blending in camouflage. Okay. The brave chickadee. And so I'm also going to do an extra chickadee today because I can paint chickadees pretty fast. I'm going to do a one from a different angle so that you can also see. I'll do this little guy too, or girl, you know, next to this one, so you can see how you would do more of the feathers. This one is really cute, but you can't see the back of the chickadee very much. So I'm gonna quickly just add that little chickadee in there too, so you can see the two of them. Also, you'll see how I make a lot of my chickadee paintings using my imagination. I kind of combine photos and whatnot just to, you know, get the different, you know, characters in my painting. Now, this one's pretty big, so I'm just going to try to squeeze one more in here. Just squeezing another little chickadee friend into the scene. So I like to get in those feathers a little darker in the beginning, so that later, you know, you can go back in and put the highlights on. Just a kind of, for me, it's a simplifying of things, so that I can, you know, get the effect I want without lots of brush strokes. So I'm going to get that. That's some blue, ultramarine blue, and transparent brown oxide. I like to add a color into my underpainting in birds, because it just adds a little bit of, you know, variety, so you're not just painting, you know, browns. I'll add a little bit of blues that here and there. Sometimes you can add purple, and depends how much color you want. With this, because I've already got so much of this bright pink going, I don't want to go too crazy on the color. Okay, so now I'm going to get some of this. Color in there. This is just that mix of white and transparent red oxide and cobalt blue, and a little bit of the orange that I mixed up. And I want to get that kind of this, you know, light, there's some light kind of orangey color in there, so I'm going to mix some of that up, just using my paint that I've got. I'll put a little bit on each one as I go. And right under here they have a lot of that pretty color right near the wings. Now these are pictures that were taken in the snow, so you can tell they've got a lot of light coming up. Well, this one here does. You can see how white, there's like a real brightness coming from underneath. So I'm guessing it's reflection from the snow that's in there. So I'm gonna have to use my imagination a little and just kind of create more of a shadow in the underbelly there. And I'm using a fairly large brush to block in. This is a number 6 silver Bristol-on, and I like the brush strokes the flat brushes make. I'm just blocking his little feet. Use a smaller brush. And when you block in the feet, remember, you've got little guiding lines you can look for. Is, you know, how far from this, you know, belly tucking in, how far does that foot go in, and how does it line up with where the eye is, and that'll just give you a guideline of where you want to place the feet. Placing the feet can be sometimes confusing if you don't guide yourself with a kind of a marker. Find a marker that you go, okay, well, there's the side, there's his eye, and there's the, you know, middle of his foot, and we're getting near the back of his head, and that's where the next foot goes. It really does help. I I remember painting in the early days of painting my birds. I would quite often realize I didn't really know how to observe where certain things were even. I just kind of guessed because I didn't really think about it too much. This little brush I've got here is just a number 2 bright, same brand, the silver brand. And brushes make a difference. You know, if you're painting with a certain type of brush, like a real bristle, like the boar bristle brushes oil painters use, you'll get a more, you know, kind of abstract, kind of impressionist look to your painting, because it just already kind of has the rough edges. This is a really kind of in between. You know, you get the bristle, but it's still quite soft, unlike some of the bristle brushes that are just really too stiff for me. So you end up finding your own style and your own, you know, what brushes you like to use, and brushes can give you different effects when you're painting. So this bird here, I've got all this dark paint on there. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see a bit better. When I want to put in all the little stripes, like these little feathers here, I just want to make that easy for myself, so that's why I have all this dark paint. And then when I get the paint on my brush, I'm going to kind of make sure my brush is flat. So when I put my paintbrush in my paint, I'm kind of dragging it flat. You know, it keeps the edge, you know, together. And then I can also kind of scoop a little bit of that paint, and I'll add a little bit of, you know, terp to it so that it's really a little waterier, you know, for what I'm going to do. That will help the paint. So that might be, I'll start off with something a little, this is cobalt blue and transparent brown and white. And I'll get a little bit of that paint on my edge like that. And then I'm gonna go in and I'm looking at my reference photo, and kind of about here is where those little stripy brushes, and you can soften them later, but just for now I'm gonna put them in pretty obvious. And I'm gonna add in some of these feathers just by dabbing a little paint. That was just some of that mix that I used for the underbelly, the transparent brown oxide and ultramarine blue, that real dark grayish brown color. I'm just going to work that in there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go and dab a little over here. And get some of that blue so we can see where the canvas stops and the bird begins. There. Now you can see more where he is, where she is. Okay. Now I'm gonna put in some of the small details in our bird's little eyes and stuff. So I'm moving to this small brush, the 0, and this is a round. And when you dip your, you know, brush to do something like the eye or the beak, I'll kind of roll my brush so that it keeps that point together. You don't want to, you know, dip your paintbrush and dabble around. Your brush tip gets all fluffed up, and then you think your handy dandy brush is going to work for you, but it won't really work well. So you gotta, you know, be careful of how you apply the paint. So this is just some black I'm putting in here. And sometimes I think last week, some people were wondering how, you know, to get the beak done without wiping out all the paint you put underneath. So I think what happens is you get a lot of paint on there, and then you go to put the highlight in and you use also a lot of paint for the highlight. So you want to be real gentle, like the way I'm putting it on. I've got the super gentle touch on that. So I'm not wiping the paint from underneath back in. And I'm just gonna mark off his little eyelid. Maybe I'll try to zoom in a little more for you. There you go. And I'm just gonna mark his little cute little eyelid. And then I'm gonna look at my other reference photo, and I'm just gonna mark in while I have that paint on my brush. You can always take it away later, but you gotta kind of put it in, and even if it's like large like that, you're gonna zap it back out later when you go in with your black paint for the eye, so you can really, you know, push and pull till you get that eye the way you want it. So I'll go in and get some black on my brush, and I'm gonna work in some of that black cat chickadee cap. And again, I'm just going to dab a little of using the point of the tip of my brush, kind of work in some of those feathers that you can see along the back of his head. Over here and put in some on this one. And again, I'm paying attention when I dip into my paint that I don't overload. It's easy to overload a small brush. So you want to, you know, go into your paint and just really, you know, kind of, you want the paint, but you don't want globs of it when you're doing the small detail. So kind of shape your paint a little the way I did with the larger brush by flattening it out and then shoveling up some of that paint. So just kind of dab some more of that black in there. realized I was not paying attention to my own rule of thumb. So I'll show you my mistake so that you guys can see. I always try to remind myself and you when I'm teaching, the eye really lines up into the beak, and you'll see my eye was way too high. It was way too high. It's so easy to do because I've painted literally hundreds of these birds, and you gotta pay attention, you see. I was sleeping at the wheel, sleeping at the Chickadee wheel. So you gotta make sure your beak lines up. So I gotta lower those eyes a little. They gotta match with the beak better. And you can see once you correct it, you go, oh yeah, that's a lot better. I thought I was awake when I started, but I think now I'm waking up. And you can cut the background into your beak if you don't like how big it is. I tend to think the beak is cuter when it's just a little bit smaller, and they have tiny little beaks. Okay, so now I'm going to repair this. This eyeball here has to be down lower. There we go. Okay. So now we've got the basics blocked in. And I'm going to pick up a size 2 silver Bristol-on brush, and I'm going to start to work on some of the feather details here. Okay, so some of the things I like to pay attention to when I'm going to do the feathers is these little cheeks. And you notice if you squint down, you see how there's lots of dark in there that show off these little white fluffy feathers. So that's why the block-in is usually a little darker. So I'm just going to build the values up a little I put a little bit of white into that mix that I used for the shadow, and I'm just going to add a little white into that. And I'm careful not to totally get rid of the underpaint. Remember, if your brush crosses over into the black, you want to just quickly give your paintbrush a little wipe. Another thing is, when you go to clean your paintbrush, most of you know this already, but for those of you starting out, always just wipe your paintbrush off first so you're not going into your turf with a whole pile of dirty paint. It just keeps your turf a little cleaner longer when you're painting. So I'm just going to shovel up some more white paint. and add some more fluffy feathers in there. And before I get working on those feathers, I need to get in some of the lighter feathers on his back. So I'm going to go to this pile of light blue I made, almost the blue for this background, but it got a little bit of the brown oxide in it, so it's a little grayer. And I'm going to get some paint on my brush, and this brush is a little bit raggedy, but I'm sure it'll be okay. And then I'm gonna look at your reference photo and just kind of check the angles of the feathers. And I'm gonna put in some of those little edges. And they don't have to be exact, you know, we're not trying out for the Audubon, you know, magazine. We're just trying to show the gist of it, you know. And I'm gonna get in some of the tail. And yeah, it you know, it's fine. And I can loosen up those edges later. For now, I'm just kind of want to get that in there, because you'll see you want to be able to have that done, or you know, close to what you would call done, before you start whipping these little feathers across. So you want to, you know, dust a few of those across. You don't want to have to go back in later and try to put the lines in after. It's just easier this way. I'm just fluffing our chickadee up. That's how we like our chickadees, fluffy. And then make sure to, if you start getting black on too much color, make sure to wipe your brush off. And I'm going to go over to our other little chickadee here, and looking at my reference photo, and I'm just going to make sure you clean your brush, because it starts to, you know, you can see it mixed in a little there. And I don't go for the fullest, brightest white, you'll notice. I'm really just kind of building so that I can gauge it better this way for, you know, how many feathers. If I just go to the bright white, like straight out, you know, super white, then I might lose some of those details. That's when you start piling the paint on, because you realized, uh-oh, I lost my values. I must add more paint. Wipe my brush and go back in and dab in some more. This has just a little bit of the white and a little more of that orange in it to create that soft that soft, you know, orangey glow that they have around their wings. And I put a little more orange into the paint here because I love that, you know, that warmth that they have in their feathers. So now I'm going to get some more of the white paint. Also, I like to leave a little shadow, you know, around the eye. You know, it gives a lot of depth to the eye area. And you can get your black paint and just kind of gently, one thing, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just gently, I'm really holding my brush light, and I'll just kind of bring it across the edge there. So you create those little fine lines just with your paintbrush. You don't have to do as much dabbing that way. And it gives a little bit more of it's just kind of a nice painterly way to do it. It was a little too dark, so I'm just gonna. So I'm looking at my reference photo for that bird, and just paying attention to kind of the movement and the, you know, the angle of the little chickadee mask there. And you can go in with a smaller brush like this little round 0 and go get in there with some paint and really, you know, add some more detail. I'm going to add some more detail back around the eye. There. And then I'll zoom in so you can see that a bit better. And then I'm going to go in and get a little paint and kind of shape the eye down below. Really, really cute. Just using kind of the side of my brush. Okay, and I'll zoom back out so you can see more. And put in some of the lighter feathers up here. Some of that is just that mix I had of, you know, the transparent brown oxide and white and the blue. Cobalt blue, my gray mix, and see a little bit of that. This is just some orange mixed in with some transparent brown oxide, and it kind of mixes in here with the black cap. You can sort of see that mixed brown and black. And you can soften up these stripes just by taking a brush that's, you know, a little bit bigger, and you can kind of go along with the stripes, and that softens it off a little. Or you could, you know, just real gently, you know, scuff them up a little. And same with these, just kind of soften them up a little. I like to make sure the edges are, you know, kind of soft. I don't want, especially areas like the tail area and that, I don't want to draw a lot of unnecessary attention. So I'm gonna take my brush and just kind of, that was my underpaint there. Now it's all style, you know, some people love, you know, to have lines around everything, and that's fine, you know, but in this painting I'm not. I talk about that more in the acrylic demo, playing with color and lines, and, you know, leaving that kind of modern red outline that people like to leave color. So I talk about that in the acrylic, and it's fun to do if that's your goal, but today's goal for me is not leaving the, you know, leaving the lines in. That's the fun part about painting. You know, you just try different things and have fun. You know, some phases you'll go through, you'll do a lot of one certain style for a while, but then you'll see you'll be inspired by another painter, and you'll say, oh, I want to do that, you know, style for a little while. And then eventually, after you take lessons for a while, what goes in eventually all comes out. You start painting your own version of everything you learn, you know, becomes your own style. And there's really nothing new under the sun. So someone will say, well, that's how so-and-so paints, and you must have copied her. And I'll say, well, there's 100 other people that paint just like her. So don't worry. Nothing new under the sun. So I'm just going to continue to detail here. And I'm going to work at getting, now that I feel, maybe I'm going to finish the other eye on this bird. So I'm going to zoom in for you. And even if the photo doesn't have a bright highlight, I like to zap one in there because it just gives them so much life, that little spark. I just get such a kick out of painting birds because they are such characters. And I watch them. I've got a hummingbird feeder and a goldfinch feeder, and my goodness, they have their own little pecking order, which is really quite hilarious to watch. Okay, I add a little bit of blue to show some light, you know, on top of their little feet, but I'm not like a big detail on the feet. What I will do is I'll cut in the background to, you know, trim some of he's got one pretty thick leg there, so I'll trim him a little. So I'm gonna mix up for the background. I'm gonna mix up some of the cobalt blue, and you know, you can backgrounds. Sometimes I like to just use my palette knife and just, you know, mix up a big puddle of color. And I never did this in the beginning, but it really saves you a lot of time if you have a good size of puddle of paint to work with when you start your background paint. And also it's good to maybe make two similar but different tones of background paint so that you can create some dimension and variety in your background. So I'll add a little maybe orange to this cobalt blue mix just to have sort of a more grayish blue mix. It's also very pretty. So you kind of have two nice puddles of paint to work with, so you're not scrubbing away paint and, you know, scrubbing into your painting. It ends up getting kind of mucky, and then you don't know if you made the right choice of color, or you start doubting what what you're doing because it can get a little mucky. So I'll just even sometimes just apply some of that background paint. And I'm starting off with the darker mix, a little bit of darker paint that I mixed. If it's too bright, just add a little bit of that red oxide in there, and that really tones it down nicely. So you get a little more of a less bright blue. Now I am happy with whatever background you choose. The background that was there is quite pretty, but it's just a little too much the same for me as the birds. Okay, so once you get a good layer of background color, I got some cobalt on my brush still. What you want to do is go in and spread that around, and you can leave little bits of this pretty color in the backdrop there, like showing through, because the birds have a lot of that color, so it can kind of look nice to leave a little bit of that underpaint too if you want. So it all depends. Some people, it drives them literally crazy to see any of that showing through, and so it's really you're the boss of what you want to do. Be creative, and I really like, my big problem is I like too many styles of painting. So I'm not so strict about this is the way and this is the only way to paint. I really like a combination of different styles, really. So I'm just getting that first layer in. If I need more paint, I got lots of it here, so just blocking in that background now. A little more. It's very fun too, once in a while, mixing up some paint. So I just added a little bit of orange to the cobalt blue and white, just to get a little less of a bright cobalt and white combination here, so it's kind of dulls it down a little. And working it into these little pink flowers. And we don't really care too much about the flowers because the bird is the main point. Just gonna trim that leg down a little. Remember, when you're going into those flowers, this is very thin paint here, so I'm not too worried. But if you're getting into trouble with, you know, the paint mixing into the background, you can either wait and let the pink dry a little, or just make sure that while you're blocking in, that if you get pink on your brush, to just wipe your brush and then keep going. I think I got so enthusiastic I bumped my camera a bit. Gotta be careful. Okay, so just gonna keep blocking in. You can cut out some of that flower if it's a little too big or too much. One thing I always pay attention to is that I don't want them to be all so, equal if they're kind of more in the focal point. We're going to go in and put some more details on the flowers too. So you can see now when I get in the background what I did earlier with the little stick by rubbing the paint, down. You have sort of a stick without even really painting anything so far on our twig. Okay, so I got my base of cobalt blue, white, and I put a little orange in it. You could dull it down with, the red oxide. And I've got a pretty solid base of the color now. And I didn't put any details on those little twigs because I thought it'd just be, it's a lot easier just to kind of go in. I got maybe some transparent brown oxide and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm just gonna dab in some little stem. There's a few little stem shapes. Get a little more paint here. just a little bit of detail in there. And then I can go in and I'll switch to like a number 2 flat, and I'll put some thicker paint on those. Make sure your brush is clean. And I'm gonna get some of that quinacridone red and some white. And let's see, get a tiny bit of the orange and more white. And I'm just gonna put a little dab or so of some thicker paint there. I'll add a little more. Add a tiny dab of orange to the mix, so it just warms it up a little. And I'm just looking at my reference photo and kind of looking at some of the shapes. Gives you a little idea, but you know, really, I find these are just more for fun, to go along with the Chickadees. So I'm looking at them more as just some little shapes. I'll just flick a few of them into the background there. You kind of just want to keep them kind of abstract. And you can just lighten up. And I don't mind if some of the blue mixes in some of the some places, because it creates some that are more getting a cooler shadow color. So some of that I have some cobalt in, and you just get some that look less in the spotlight. And then you can even take your palette knife and just get a little bit of the quin red in there. And sometimes I'll just, make a few real juicy ones so that you can, pick out a few. Don't do tons of them that way, but that's probably good enough. It's easy to get carried away with that stuff. And then you can get a little white and put a tiny dab of orange in, and you can go and add some palette knife to your bird at the end too. I'm not a palette knife expert, but I just play around with them. Just have a little fun with adding some of that paint. And now we've got, I made the dark part of the background, but I also mixed up some nice light colors. So I've got this cobalt blue and white and it has more white in it, so there's a lot of nice, you know, it has a nice bright feeling. And so I'm going to just put some of that in there. And it's a feeling of like not really knowing exactly what you're just putting the paint on, and then you can adjust it with your paintbrush later. I just like the variety. The feeling it gives with the birds, especially if you got all these busy flowers, you know, you can kind of get away with a little more texture in the background, because this is a lot of texture, you know. That's what that is. So I'm just dabbing on some of that paint and here and there, and then I'm gonna go and get my paintbrush and just kind of, you know, smooth some of those sections down. And just play around, you know, you can take away the edges. But it gives a neat texture, just kind of makes it more interesting. And then just kind of carry that on. And you know, I kind of dragged those little light pink pieces into it a little. It's just kind of neat, and then you can go you can take your palette knife again, and sometimes you can, you know, make some marks that are kind of interesting. Just kind of mess it up a little. And now around the bird, I want to just flick some of the edges. We marked away some of the black, the softness of the black head on the chickadee. So I want to just kind of go in, and I'll just sort of, I'm going to take a little black and I'll some more black paint on there, get a little texture going with the black, and then I'll always kind of flick a few across back into the background, you know, so you get the texture going back. Let me just kind of draw some of that back in, and then pop some more real dark in there. Like that. And so now I think we could add a little detail to our twig, because that's pretty much the only thing I haven't gone back to. And so if I'm looking at my reference photo, I see sort of a light, there's like a light orangey or pinky coral color. That would work, you know, pretty good with the background. So I might just, take a little something orange, muck it up a little. I mixed it into like a bit of that grayish brown color, so it's not just, you know, super bright orange. And I'll just maybe take the edge of my palette knife and, you know, kind of work some of that in there, or I'll just get my brush and I will take a little, shovel up some with the edge and put some of that in there. And then when underneath the bird, you can still put something light, or you could take something more like this cobalt blue and really kind of get in that shadow there. You know, just to really work in some of that shadow. And you could add a little bits of that blue into the pink, you know, just kind of a pretty bit of play on the color there. Just a few dabs in there. Let's put a little bit of blue in there. And let's see what else am I missing. Anything? Well, let's see. You could take a little bit of that blue color and just kind of bring it up from the bottom to show some of that light coming up on the branch, like that, just in a few areas. And you could even have fun with the pink and take a little bit in some areas, even a little bit of that pink there, and you could, you know, pop a little bit of that, you know, show a little bit of that, maybe take a little bit of that away, but just some of that glow off the flowers. You could even put a little bit of, just a tiny hint of that pink on our bird, because he's near those flowers, getting a little reflection. That's kind of fun. And I might take a little bit of pink and just kind of put a little here and there, you know, into the upper part of the painting, just very abstractly, you know, like that, just to, you know, play with that a bit. Oh yeah, and then I think just kind of make a little more detail on this bird's tail. And I might get a little bit of that blue in the shadows there. And I just want to lose that edge a little, so your eye doesn't go right to it. So it's kind of the whole idea of what they call lost and found edges. You know, you find an edge and then you want to lose an edge. And I might just add a little more of that pretty kind of rusty orange color there. Just bringing the background to the maybe we'll fluff her up a little more. Okay. You can play with all these things. There's a lot of little details. You can make the flowers more realistic if you wanted, but I kind of like just keeping them kind of abstract like that. So, let's see. So I think that's about it. You could go in and just to bring in this, take a look at your painting and see what, you know, to balance some of this real dark, you could take a little black and just make sure you got, you know, the shadows, little feet in, you know, really good. And, you know, look at this one, give it a little more depth there. And you could even take a little black and just to give it a little more balance with all this black up here, I might put a real, you know, one or two real dark stems in there. It's just like the light, your eye bounces off the bright lights. So you want to have a few of these darks that just aren't, your eye isn't just stuck with those darks up there. You could, you know, just put in one or two dark stems. You don't want a whole ton of them, but so I think that kind of balanced it out a little. Yeah, you don't, when you're doing branches or trees, you never want to have one solid line. You want to, you know, kind of change the value or change the color along the way, so you're not, you know, just going straight along like a, you know, a beam. Well, I think that's about it. I'm going to switch the cameras over so that if you have any questions or comments, you can ask me, or hopefully I covered everything clearly. Let's see. Should be able to unmute or whatever now.